And we're live. Welcome back to the iFilmmaker podcast. My name is Ariel Martinez, and today we have my friend Preston Smith that's joining us on this episode. But before we get into our conversation, I just want to remind you guys that we are live on YouTube, and we have a few people already joining us live. And those of you that are not here, it's probably because you didn't get a notification, and probably because you're not subscribed. So I encourage you to go and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you get notified every time we go live. And you can go and check that out and join our conversation. Ask your questions. I see Brandon Fountain is already here. He's a regular here. Thanks for joining us, buddy. And a few other people with us as well. So make sure you go check that out. Also, check out a giveaway that we're doing over at the iFilmmaker Podcast Instagram, which is at iFilmmaker Podcast. We are currently hosting a giveaway with F&V Lighting. F&V Lighting, they're giving away a Z400S soft light. Let me tell you a little bit something about this light. I have the Z800S soft. This is an amazing light. How amazing is it? The first time I unpackaged it, I turned it on. It was extremely bright. I thought that before I even knew that there was a brightness dial on this thing, I thought it was already at its max brightness, but I was wrong. I go back, I look at it, it's only at 15%. So I started turning that dial up, and that thing was extremely, extremely bright. You really cannot look at this light while it's on. It is ridiculously bright. And it's really, really good and accurate. It has a CRI of 98 plus, which is very, very good. They also have great honeycomb filters for it and all that, and turn it into a softbox, and it's really, really good light. So I encourage you guys to go check that out and be a part of that giveaway. I see more people joining us live. Thank you all for joining. Mr. Preston Smith. Mr. Smith. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So today, I thought we would just have a cool, casual conversation, as we always do here on the iFilmmaker podcast. I guess let's just jump right into it. I assume that our conversation is just going to continue to take us into a whole bunch of different directions. So Brandon is already asking if I'm using my GH5 as my webcam. I am using my GH5 as my webcam today. It's usually the A6300 with a 20 millimeter prime, but that's currently on loan. So kind of had to, if you follow me on Instagram, I actually posted what it kind of looks like. It's not bad. It's not bad, but I kind of need a wider lens. I feel like it's a little too close to me. So I got to back that up. So, Preston, I'm saying Brandon, Preston, tell me a little bit about your background. You're a photographer and DP. I don't know if it's in that order, but you do both. Basically, you know, and I've seen your work, awesome work. I love the visuals. You obviously know what you're doing. How did you get started in, I guess, the whole industry, and what did you start with first?
Yeah, man. That's actually kind of a funny story. I was just thinking about that today. I was in corporate America for, I don't know, about 8 years as a, sales guy, a territory manager, sales manager, all that kind of stuff. So photography was just something that I picked up as a hobby. We'd gotten our first dog, Wally. It was 8 years ago, right about this time. Because I remember it because the World Cup was on in, I think it's 2008. So it's kind of easy to remember when we got him. But so I got my first camera in 2009. I think it was a Nikon D3000. Two kit lenses, like the 18 to 5,000, whatever their kit lens is.
Yeah.
And so that was like the first experience I had with a camera.
This is 2008.
2009 is when I got a camera. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 2009.
Gotcha.
And at the time I was real competitive in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So it was just kind of natural for me to have the camera with me, competitions, taking, taking photos of my buddies, competing and stuff like that. And, it was kind of one of those rabbit holes that started going deep pretty quick.
That happens to a lot of people.
Yeah. So it was just kind of like that typical story of, it was a hobby. and then it
Mm-hmm.
became, kind of became like a little side hustle, and it was basically a full-time hustle with a full-time job. And then it was April 2 years ago. It was April, yeah, 2 years ago, this past April, that I made the jump to quit my corporate job and just do photography full time. So at the time, it was just all photography, wedding photography. I was, I'm really active in the CrossFit, space, doing photography for events and, regionals and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And about, a little over a year ago, Jonathan Mayfield and I shot a series with Matt Fraser. That one's on YouTube. It was like
Yeah.
16 episodes, something like that. And
Looks
so it was
good.
kind of, thank you. And so that was kind of the first real video work that I did. For anybody that knows Jonathan Mayfield, he, he's a video guy.
Right.
And so I was, doing a lot of on-site learning, learning how to use an FS5 and how to shoot and edit and color and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it, after that series, my business kind of went from photography to, videography, pretty quickly.
Right. So it's fairly new, would you say? Like,
Oh man, yeah. Yeah, really new. Like literally videography in the past year is really the amount of work that I've done in this space. So
you're doing great, man. I'm loving the stuff, the content that you're putting out there.
Thank you.
It's looking good, man. And now, I mean, out of nowhere, now you're a red owner.
Yeah.
Like, you just have a red. Like, it's so funny because we worked together, I think like 3 years ago in Wadapalooza for the first time.
Yep.
And we've worked every year since. We worked that event together. And I've always seen you as a photographer. You've always been out there snapping those pictures, and they're coming out great. And then out of nowhere, just 1 year randomly, you just pull out a red. I'm like, how do you go from photography to just having a red and you're just out there running around? I'm like, dude, what the heck?
Man, that's the problem with being a gearhead,
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, it was literally like, it was so funny, while we're shooting the Fraser stuff, we were like, yeah, like the FS5 is perfect. Like we won't need to, there's no need for a red,
that sounds like Mayfield talking.
Yeah. It's like, we'll never need, raw files. We don't need to shoot in 5K raw, the red's not necessary. And then we end up shooting like this spot for Men's Warehouse where we rented a red. And yeah, as soon as we shot with it, we were like,
that's right. So you guys landed a big job that obviously would justify the purchase.
Well, no, it was like we did a job and we rented the red, and then just after seeing, after having the chance to play the files
the difference.
And see, the difference, we were like, oh man. And so I think it was like within like 3 weeks, like I had bought a red, and Jonathan at first was like, no, I don't need it. And I think it was like he came over. I live right next to like an airfield, and so there's an air show every year. And so
that must be awesome to shoot.
It's amazing.
Oh man,
the flight path is literally like right over my house, so I get a free air show for like.
Come on.
So I had Jonathan come over to hang out with, just kind of see the show, and so he brought his kid and wife, and it was the same day like my Scarlett showed up, and so he helped me like assemble it and play with it. And literally we were shooting a wedding the next day together, and I show up and he's got this goofy grin on his face, and he's like, guess what? I was like, what? He's like, I bought a red too.
So we're all just buying reds.
Yeah. So we're just dropping 25 G's on reds. But yeah, so that kind of snowballed quick. And so it was just kind of the decision that we made that
we
want to keep, running work at, those next levels. We saw it as as an investment worth doing, and, kind of had some things lined up that was going to justify it. And yeah, so just kind of been off to the races since then.
It's so funny. So you decide, I want to do video now. I'm going to buy a red. You didn't even go through the process.
I mean, I had an FS5, I bought an FS5 about March.
I didn't know you had one.
Yeah. So I had an FS5 March of last year. Whenever we got contracted to shoot the Fraser thing, like I was like, okay, like Jonathan had an FS5. So I was like, okay, I need to get one too. So that we're, so we have the same product. But yeah, like I said, I had that FS5 for like 6 months before, before I picked up the red. So it didn't get many miles on it.
Oh man.
Yeah.
And you still have it as a backup right now,
Yeah,
or
yeah. I
it's
still have it
just
as a
sitting?
D cam, yeah, for
Oh, nice.
backup purposes. I mean, it's still a great rig.
Oh yeah,
Obviously, I
for
mean,
sure.
you've got an FS5, so you know
Yeah.
how good it performs.
No,
Um, you
yeah,
know,
no, it's a great little camera. The unfortunately the GH5 is ruining it for me. But that's a whole
interesting.
nother. Yeah, we'll talk about that
Yeah.
after. Um, cool, man. So I want to get into social media.
Yep.
So you posted something interesting that I think we should get into, because I think it's a great topic, right? So my whole I guess philosophy and is, the camera doesn't matter. What matters is how you use, and I'm sure people hear that all the time, um, and to some extent, I think it's true, right?
Mhm.
Now, your post said something in the realm of, actually, you know what? I'll let you, I guess, say what you said, what you had posted. You're,
Yeah.
uh-huh.
Yeah, it was funny. I was just on a flight, and I don't even know why it popped up in my head, but
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
just kind of thinking about it. It always kind of cracks me up that I think I wrote like it's always funny that the people that tell you that gear doesn't matter always have like the nicest kits. And
That's
so
true. That's true, though.
yeah,
But go ahead.
so I put at the bottom, I was like, FYI, good gear does matter.
Right.
And and so I was thinking about it, and I kind of, I mean, it's not a hard and fast rule, but
Right.
in my mind, two people kind of fall into that category of gear doesn't matter.
Sure.
And I was in one of those categories for a long time, and that first category is people that kind of convince themselves that the better gear doesn't matter because of budgetary reasons. So it's like,
I've seen those. I've seen those.
yeah, so it's like, you convince yourself that you don't need to step up to, like when I started in photography, right? Like I had my next step up from the D3000 was like a Canon 60D. So it was
Yeah.
kind of like I was still dabbling with photography, so I wasn't really ready to jump into like, full
Sure.
frame. And so what I did was like I kind of convinced myself like, oh, I'll make small incremental jumps instead of just making the large jump to the gear that I know that I'll like. So instead of going from the 60D to the 5D Mark III at the time, I went to the 6D, which was full frame, but it wasn't quite,
Right. Right.
the better gear. And so you kind of talk yourself into thinking like, oh, like, yeah, like I don't need a 1DX. I'll never need a 1DX. And,
Right.
you end up spending more money, kind of convincing yourself not to just buy the
Yeah.
gear that you know that you're going to use. And that's kind of what we were doing when we had our FS5s, right? We're like, oh yeah, like we don't need, Cine lenses, and we don't need a red because it's too
Yeah.
much storage. It's, who needs to edit in RAW and all that kind of stuff. But it's really
Right.
just kind of, you talk yourself into that because it's like, well, I can get a full,
Yeah.
FS5 setup with screens and all that for around like 8-9 grand. And then if I want to get a red, then I'm going to drop like 25 grand. Um,
Yeah.
so that's kind of like the bucket that I fell in. But the other bucket that I see is when people talk about, oh, gear doesn't matter, it's kind of like it's kind of like in a bragging way, like, oh, I can make it work no matter what I've got. If you give me a T5i and a kit
Right.
lens, like I'm gonna make it work. It doesn't matter. Like good filmmakers will make it work. Okay, yeah, like if you have like perfect conditions and lighting and you have all the time in the world,
Right.
yeah, then yeah, that could plausibly be true,
I,
but we
I
all know there's different levels to
I
it.
I definitely do agree. So this is a reason why that it's good that we give context to things like that, right? Um, I think, and you have a good following on social media, and the reason why, I wanted to discuss it with you, because people seeing that, I think some people can read something like that and think, then I'm hopeless with my camera,
Yep.
So I think that we should definitely give context, because we have newbies, people that are just starting off, and maybe they have the camera that you started off with, and they might feel hopeless if they don't have something better.
Right.
So in my opinion, I definitely do agree. Like I think that um no matter what you have, in my opinion, no matter what you have, you can make good work. But
Hmm.
that the key word there is good, right? The term good is very relative. It's very relative to what you're doing. So, uh, in my like back when I was starting, I was shooting on a T3i
Mhm.
video, and the work that I was doing to myself was good. I really enjoyed the work that I was putting. I mean, obviously, I could always tweak a few things after, but as I continued to develop, today I see those videos and I'm looking at it and I cringe.
Yeah.
What I used to consider good,
Yep.
but it's okay because I was doing it. And the real point is that I'm trying to make is, it doesn't matter what you have, work with what you just do it. And as
Yes.
the budget comes in, if you have the budget, it's definitely a worthwhile investment
Yep.
to get better gear. But then even then, I think to an extent, uh, so man, and I'm a huge gearhead, so I'm always like locked in on the latest gear that's coming
Yeah.
out, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm also a very impulsive buyer. So I'll
Same.
get things and really get into trouble
Yep.
financially. I'm like, crap, should I just kind of like how Mayfield just got a red just because you got it?
Yeah. Dude, friends that do the same thing are dangerous combo, man.
Oh
It's
my
like the
gosh. Oh
evil
my
Kermit meme,
gosh.
where it's like you got
Yeah,
regular Kermit and evil Kermit. It's like that. Me and Mayfield joke all the time. It's like that's literally us, where it's
that's
like,
so
oh, I
funny.
really don't need this. And the other one's like, do it anyway.
That's
But
so funny.
no, but to your point, gear can never substitute for your abilities, right? Like
Sure.
you can have the nicest kit, and if you don't have it, if you don't have the eye, if you don't have that ability to storytell, there's only so much that gear can get you. Um, but on the same token, if you have a ton of ability, but you have big limitations with what your gear is, it can also work against you. So
Oh,
it's about
absolutely. For
finding
sure.
that balance of where your skill set is, where your where your workload is.
Right.
Obviously you can't go out and buy a red if you're starting out, because it's like, okay, well, how are you going to pay for this thing?
Yeah.
Unless you're just independently wealthy, then go nuts. But um, yeah, so it's about making those incremental jumps, but not talking yourself out of making the larger investment.
Mhm.
Um, because ultimately it costs you in the long run, because it's like you use this piece of gear that you may only keep for 6 months before you upgrade to the next piece. So that's kind of like that balancing act. So luckily for me, when I was still doing my corporate thing, every dollar I made doing photography or whatever, I just put right back into the business, because I had once I got into that rhythm where I was kind of thinking like, man, I might be able to make a career out of this thing. That was all I was worried about, was getting myself set up so that I'm not going to have to make all these giant purchases when this is the sole source of income now.
Sure.
Yeah, that didn't work because of course, like buying a
Yeah.
red and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
that was always the mindset, was like, keep investing in what I'm doing, because the better the product is, ultimately the better the work's going to be. And you don't want to look back, like you said, you look back at what you thought was good and you cringe. Man, if you're not doing that, then there's something wrong.
Yeah, there's something
if
wrong.
if you don't look back 2 years, and think to yourself like, oh my gosh, like why were the people telling me I was doing good? Like this stuff is terrible. Like then that should be a red flag, because you
Yeah.
should be always progressing, whether it's in color, whether it's in post, whether it's in composition, like whatever it may be, you should always be looking back at your work and just thinking like, man, I could have been doing a lot better than that. So, yeah, I think that's a big thing.
Absolutely. Like, when people, as I continued to progress, I started getting better understanding. So I used to work a lot with the Red Epic Dragon, a lot. And it was literally, that's something that just fell on my lap, that a friend of a friend told me that this agency was looking for someone to cover the video services, and they have the Dragon, and I met with them. It wasn't really an interview. It was literally just negotiate price, because they seen my work, and they were, I guess I guess satisfied with the work. They weren't like crazy impressed and stuff.
Mhm.
But a part of the job was that the Red Epic Dragon is mine to use for their stuff, and they even let me use it for my own stuff. And I got a lot of work done with that camera. And it's so funny because I always said back then, and this is me growing, this is me learning, continuing to learn. I would always say the more I use the Dragon, the more I realized I don't need it, right? Now, my opinion on that kind of changes. The reason I would think that way is because I did not fully understand the full-on capability of what using a red is. Back then, I wasn't really too crazy about coloring. Now
Yep.
I'm crazy about coloring. Now I know the differences between having a lot more depth in your color space rather than just having 8-bit color.
Yeah.
Now I'm fully understanding that stuff. Now I wish I can go back like to the to my old self and be like, okay, let me see how this goes. See, so things like that I think is very important. Even though, like, so now I choose gear that kind of caters to the way that I like to shoot. That I no, not like I need to shoot, right? So I'm usually handheld, super run and gun, and I need something that kind of helps me in that aspect. However, audio is very important for me as well. Usually my audio is going directly into the camera because I am a one-man band, and you can start seeing how, in that sense, a red starts kind of getting out of the picture with
Dude,
that.
the preamps in the red are not good.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, well, I mean, like, the one of the best things about FS5 is, you have a shotgun mic attached to it and
right.
you're running it directly into the camera and you have auto levels. So
Yeah,
you have ways of adjusting levels, quickly and easily, or you have auto levels to, so everything kind of stays clean. Plus the
right.
preamps in the camera, give you really clean audio. The red, there's no
I
there's no auto levels. The preamps are not good, so the audio that you do get is pretty rough. So you just
right.
have to kind of learn, like, all right, if I'm not going to have a boom mic and somebody recording into an external recorder, then I'm just going to have to live with the fact that this audio is going to be just kind of mediocre at
Yeah,
best.
most of the time. Are you saying that based on your experience with the Scarlet? Because I've actually had the opposite experience with the Red, but that's the Dragon. I don't know if there's a difference in audio. And I'm also saying that because when the Red that I was using, we had an audio module, the IO module that
Hmm.
basically you connect to the back of the Red, and it has
Yep.
XLR inputs and all that stuff. Is that what you're using that too as well?
Mine doesn't. My my IO module doesn't have XLR inputs. It's got the quarter to
Okay.
plug in. But yeah, it's just the audio levels are not automatically controlled. You have to go in there, manually control the preamps and the gain and all that kind of stuff. And it just kind of, yeah, it's just not the same. It's just
Oh,
not the
okay.
same. The audio is not bad. I mean, it's usable, but there's a big difference between the audio coming out of an FS5's, audios versus a red. So if somebody knows of a much
Yeah.
better solution, for the red, please, let me know, because um, that's
On
just kind
on
of
on
what it
your
is.
shoots, how do you handle audio, or do you even handle audio?
Well, luckily a lot of the times, it's going to be two of us shooting. So, a lot of, in the fitness world, a lot of it's going to be, just pretty visuals, right? And then, like, we'll do a separate sit down interview. And so that's going to be the bulk of our audio for voiceover is going to be from the interview. And
Okay.
then, the preamps and the red are good enough for ambient sound, barbells dropping, things like that. But for any kind of, commercial shoot, we're going to have an audio guy on site, um, you know, taking care of all that for us.
Right.
So, but in a run and gun setup, usually we've got good audio gear. One of us will put the camera down and get the boom mic out and capture audio, and the other one focuses on filming. So you just kind of have to find like that balance of prioritizing, um,
Right.
you know, what audio is the most important versus what you can live with just coming out of the shotgun mic.
Yeah. So going back to and I'm gonna go way back to the post. Um because I want to make another point here with you said it's funny that the people that say the gear doesn't matter are the ones that have the good
Yeah,
gear.
yeah,
That is extremely true. That is
yeah.
very, very true. Uh, but I also think it's true that the reason they say that it's because now that they have all the gear, they know Okay. I'm a perfect example of that. I did say I am a compulsive buyer. I usually
Yeah.
get stuff like I have a few lights that I've never used that I've bought
Yeah.
and I've never used. Because honestly, it has not personally made my videos better.
Right.
And that goes to show that, I mean, more gear is not gonna basically, I buy gear for convenience, and now that I think about it, I think I try to make my job easier, whether rather than I guess my image better, you know. And that could play a big role as to why I think that, the more gear you have, um and you know what, now that I'm thinking about it, those are actually two different things, is more gear and good gear. Um so let me take it to you. I noticed you have your cine lenses, and
Hmm.
I'm not going to pretend like I'm very experienced with cinema lenses. You have your cinema lenses, and you have your ND filter, and your, I don't know what kind of, I saw you had filters on your matte box and all that
Yep.
stuff. That stuff is not cheap. That
No.
stuff is not cheap.
No.
Um, do you think, and I guess, it obviously depends on the level that you're at, um, is that like the image that gives you, is it worth the price? I don't even know how much you paid for it. I just know that usually stuff like that is very expensive.
Yeah.
And I think about it, I'm like, man, I can't see myself justifying, getting a whole full-on matte box, and at least not right now,
Right.
and don't get me wrong, I've seen stuff and it looks really nice. um I don't know, it might be because of the kind of work that I do, that I
Yeah.
just usually don't require it.
Yeah. So I mean, here's the thing. When the FS5 has built-in NDs, right? So you have the variable ND that you have on there. So
Right.
the matte box that I've got the bright tangerine misfit, and then I've got the Tiffin roto filter inside. So I have a variable ND, like 1 to 6 stop ND that I have. So it's basically what the Sony does internally. The problem with the Red is the Red doesn't have internal NDs. I mean, I think somebody just came out with like a mount that has variable NDs built into like the mount. But again, you're still going to pay, 2, 3 grand for that. Um, so,
Ouch.
so absolutely like a matte box for run and gun. If you want to shoot wide open, if you want to shoot at 1.5, outside, you're not going to be able to do that unless you have an ND filter. So having
Yeah.
that flexibility is definitely key. And even on site, shooting in a studio, if the director wants to shoot wide open at 1.5 or 1.3, you're going to have the ability to stop it down. And it's just, for me, it's a
uh,
lot cleaner having that roto filter versus, stacking up a one
yeah.
stop glass, a stop glass, and then, marrying it together. It's just preference.
Yeah, I fully understand the ND aspect of it,
Yep.
but I thought you had some sort, oh, because you were using an anamorphic lens. I remember you showed it to me.
Oh, yeah, yes. Yeah, I was using this thing. I was playing with it. It's from Vid Atlantic. It's an anamorphic mimic. So what it is,
Oh, okay.
it's like this filter that you put in your matte box, and then it basically just has like wire that you stretch across it.
Mhm.
So you have to shoot it like 50 millimeter or higher. Otherwise you'll see like the vignetting and stuff. But what happens is, like, you shoot it into, like, at Wadapalooza, where you have all these light sources, you shoot directly into that light source, and it kind of spreads the light out across.
Right, that
Yeah,
anamorphic.
that thing was only like $75. So that thing, it's not like a big investment. I was like, hey,
Is that an adapter or
no, it goes in the matte box. Yeah, it goes in the matte box.
really? So
Yeah,
it's a filter that's doing that?
yeah. So it's a black square, and then you have like a cutout, like, like a bolt
Uh-huh.
cutout, and then the string goes across it.
Right.
Use like some blue wire, and it goes across it, so that way when you're shooting into light, it kind of stretches across
Yeah.
that wire.
I've seen F DIY versions of that where
Hmm.
people literally
Yeah.
attach a fishing line.
Yep.
They attach a fishing line onto their lens, and you'll get that same kind of effect.
Yep.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, because anamorphic lenses aren't cheap.
Oh my
but
gosh.
but yeah, but
The,
it is an interesting conversation. The difference between using a DSLR lens and a Cine
right.
lens, because if you look at specifically Sigma's lineup, if you look at, like, I think you shoot with the 18 to 35 a lot, right?
Yes, and the 50 to
Yeah,
100.
right. So the funny thing is, the internal glass from yours. So an 18 to 35 DSLR is $799 retail, right? The 18 to
Yeah.
30, the 18 to 35 cinema lens is $39.99. So it's
Yes.
$4,000. Right.
And
Okay.
you know what
And it's the
blows
same,
my
and it's the
mind?
same glass. It's the same
That's what
glass.
blows my
Yeah, yeah.
mind.
So it's the same glass, but what you're paying for is you're paying for the manual aperture, which is just so valuable when you're shooting. Because if you're going in dynamic situations from like inside to outside,
Sure.
you need to be able to roll that aperture to compensate for exposure. Because otherwise, you're going to be rolling the ISO, and it's going to be like these hard click downs, right? And it's going to look really
Unless
bad.
you have the FS5 where it has that variable ND built in,
Right.
where you could roll that also, but
Yeah.
that's like the only camera that has it.
Yeah, so it's like you have that option, but
Yeah.
where you notice the biggest difference is in the focus pulling, because on a DSLR you make the slightest adjustment, you're out or
Yeah.
you're in. On Cine, on Cine housed lenses,
Yeah.
that pull is such a longer distance, so you have a much longer forgiveness. So you can kind of be a little in or out, and it's not going to ruin your shot. Versus like a DSLR lens, if you're like you move it just a little bit, you're like at their ear or you're at their nose. So it's not forgiving.
It's so funny because I at Wadapalooza this last year, you Mayfield busted out a ton of those Sigma Cine lenses,
Mhm.
and I'm like, dude, let me use some of those, and I started using them, and I was so used to the DSLR
Yep.
18 to
It's a
35
lot of
that,
work.
oh my gosh,
It's a
it's
lot of
so
like just cranking.
I'm so used to, and I've gotten really good. I've gotten really good at following focus with that, but
Yeah.
uh give me that lens and I'm like, crap, this thing is never gonna get there. So I keep
Yeah.
turning and turning and turning. And I'm like, dude, it just made it really difficult to follow the person.
Yep.
I think both things. Here's the thing. I just can't. I don't. Damn, $3,500.
Yeah.
Maybe twice the price.
Right.
Double the price maybe.
Yeah.
But
It's all in
I mean,
all in
and
the
I get
high
it. That's
end.
still relatively extremely cheap compared to other cinema lenses.
Oh, dude, I've been
Yeah.
lucky enough to do some shoots, the last couple weeks with
Yeah.
the RE Master Primes, and
Oh,
those
nice.
retail for like 25 grand a pop.
Come
And you're
on.
like, it's
And
like,
those are
why is a lens?
primes.
It's like, why does a prime lens cost 25 grand? And then when you shoot with it, you're like, okay, I get it. It's like, you can shoot at 1.3 aperture, so you can shoot super wide open.
Sure.
The focus pulling is like silky, silky smooth. I mean, we're talking like you barely have to even do anything to move, the focus ring.
Yeah.
But also where you see the biggest gap is it's two things that I saw.
Yeah.
There's zero chromic aberration at 1.3, even shooting against like a straight, like super backlit.
Doesn't that depend on the camera though, or is it the
No,
lens has a lot to do with it?
that's lens.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
the chromic comes up in the lens.
Okay.
And so the way that it interacts with the light.
Sure.
But then also because it's such a precise lens, you have a much greater what they call area of confusion. So even at 1.3, you can be slightly off and you're not going to see like that hard gap. If you
Right.
look at like, if you get like a DSLR lens and you kind of shoot something close, wide open, you kind of get like this tunnel, right, of what's in focus and everything falls off. And it's like this hard tunnel of
Yeah.
what's in focus and what's not. Like say you shoot against a wall, right? You're going to see like a hard stop where the focus is and where it falls off. Man, with the RE Master Primes, you don't have that hard stop. It's a nice gradual roll off.
You're talking about when you're shooting at a wall at an angle, right?
Yeah. You see like that basically that little bracket where what's in focus and everything else is really off. With the Master Primes, that's just a nice smooth roll off. So if you're shooting some details at
Okay, I
1.3,
see.
you don't have like this stop line of like, here's what's not focus, here's what
So
is.
it's very forgiving. Like if you're slightly out of focus, it's not, you won't be able to tell too much.
Extremely forgiving, extremely forgiving. So it became obvious,
Yeah.
using it. There's like, okay, like I understand. It's like the amount of flexibility you get in several areas,
Yeah.
gives you a lot to work with. But that's one of those cases where it's like, okay, come back to that thing. Do I need to spend 25 grand on a lens? It's like, no,
true.
I don't. I'm not. That's not where I'm at right now. But
here's where I think here's where I think gear, like good gear, matters. Like, if you know what you're doing, I think it's one of the biggest determining factors of as to what gear you should be using. I've seen some ridiculously amazing work, and I mean ridiculous, and come to find that it was shot on the GH5, which is I think one of those pieces where I'm like, I'm looking at this, I'm like, this is GH5 footage. Like, I cannot believe how good this thing looks.
Yep.
And that's actually like that reminded me, like, man, to me, like it really doesn't matter whether you have a red, I think, or a GH5, because if you have a red, if you don't know what you're doing with it, man. And I know, I
Yep.
know that you're limited when you really want to go in there and tweak the colors. And I'm sure that, so the video that I saw, it was usually natural colors and whatnot. You could tell that they didn't really try to make go crazy cinematic, but it
Mhm.
was just so clean. And I'm like, I need that in my life, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's such a cheap price point where I'm like, all right, let me just pick this up real quick. And
Mhm.
well, cheap compared to like other similar cameras.
Right. Right.
But
But even then, it still kind of comes down to gear because it's like, what was he, what lens was he using? It's like the Apple commercials, right? The shot with iPhone. It's like,
oh
okay, technically the shot with
yeah.
iPhone, but what you don't see is you don't see the adapters and the
Yes,
$30,000
yes.
glass at the end of it. So it's like, yes, it is shot with iPhone, but it's not like I
Yeah,
pull out my iPhone and I start shooting a movie. It's like, no, you've
exactly.
got it on a stand, you got
Right.
adapters, you got
That is an iPhone in the hands of a very,
right.
very skilled filmmaker.
Right, right. With all the time in the
Of
world and all the
course.
budget, all the lights that he needs. So it's yeah, so you still have to remember it's like, okay, what other factors are contributing to that and how much
Sure.
time are you given? And I mean, because in your world and a lot of mine, run and gun is not forgiving.
Oh
Um,
no, yeah.
it's
Yeah,
not forgiving. So
you
it's
gotta get it
yeah.
right.
If you've got 5 days to shoot a piece that's kind of a passion
Right.
project and you can wait for the perfect light and
Yeah.
the perfect scenery and all that, then great. But
And that's why experience matters.
mhm,
Experience matters because I mean, I've been shooting on the FS5 for a while now, and the more I shoot with it, and even the GH5 and all that stuff, and just all the general experience I've had in the industry, um, I've come to know how to expose. I don't have to think too much about it that often. Especially if I'm running and gunning. I'm not talking about interview stuff. I'm talking about running and gunning like CrossFit events and all that stuff.
right.
I can more or less tell where I'm getting a good shot. Um, and let's say if my white balance is slightly off, it is very forgiving, especially if you're shooting on the red, when you
Mhm.
have when it's metadata. And in
There's
that
there's
sense,
no set settings with the red. I mean,
huh?
it's all there's no set settings with the red because it's all raw data. So you
Exactly,
can
exactly.
you can change, you can change your white balance. I mean, you can
Yeah,
change everything up. So I mean, that's where I found was just one of the biggest
right,
gaps was the amount that you have to do in post processing. The amount of forgiveness, the color space, the new red IPP2, gamma
right.
profile. I mean, what that thing does in the shadows and highlights and the gradual roll off, it's just like when you start seeing it, you're just like, holy crap! Like, okay, like I'm starting to see where the big gaps are.
Yeah, especially yeah, it really comes down to like if you know what you're doing, you can get good work done with a relatively cheap camera. Like
100%.
where you know put a GH5 in the hands of like one of those filmmakers that shot on iPhone, those Apple commercials on iPhone. Oh my god,
Yep.
they'll do
I still have,
phenomenal work.
still some of my favorite photos, whether it be of the dogs or, the first wedding I ever shot. I mean, there's still photos where it's like I shot with inferior gear and there's still some of my favorite images. So
Right.
I think, filmmaking, photography really, cliche, but it comes down to like your passion.
Oh
If you're
yeah.
if you're
Oh
willing to
yeah.
work and grind, like you can get amazing stuff no matter what the
Yeah.
what the gear is.
It's
The gear
and
just augments your ability. It doesn't create
yeah,
any kind of ability, doesn't give
sure.
you any magical powers. It augments what's already there,
Exactly.
which is what it's supposed to do. It's not a crutch to lean on. It's a tool.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
funny because you just made my case.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, no, no, exactly.
yeah, yeah.
I think it's kind of a personal thing.
Yeah, yeah.
That, but it's just, if you have clients that are gonna want, if they're gonna want 5K footage or 4K
Oh,
footage
for
that
sure.
has, raw processing and things like that, if you have regular work that's justifying the purchase, then it's like,
Yeah.
don't be scared to, to go all in on yourself and trust that, it's going to work out. If you're shooting
Yeah.
sports all the time, like, don't be afraid, to maybe look at getting a 1DX Mark II or a Nikon D5, because that's kind of the industry
Yeah.
standard for what you're doing. It's like, just kind of evaluate what your workload is, what your anticipated workload will be, and make the decision based on those,
It's
those criterias.
it's crazy because people see movies in Hollywood, right? And they see, oh, it was shot on the red. And I was there too. I was there too. When I was with the Red Dragon all the time, I'm like, hey, I have a Red Dragon, you know?
Yep.
And I would see, oh, look, that movie was shot on red, right? On my
Mhm.
same, and I would see movies, it was shot on this exact camera.
Yep.
But I could never make my image look like that.
Right.
It doesn't matter
Yeah.
what.
Like,
Listen.
there's still a $50,000 lens attached to it, and there's
Oh
still
yeah.
a director and a DP and 30 lights
No,
and
the colorist, the DP, and all that stuff. I would never be able to make my image. I wouldn't say never, but at that time, come
yeah.
on. I
Nope.
was so far off, and that's and I'm sure even those people can go ahead and grab a 5D Mark III and
And make
still
it
make
work. Yeah.
better content.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like now, it's Red's got the heliums and the Monstros, the 8Ks,
Yeah,
these giant resolution, cameras. But most movies are being shot on an Arri, and those are
yeah,
shooting at 4K,
right,
so it's
right,
like they're not shooting at 8K on Arris.
right. And
But
that's new. And that's new because just up until like 5 minutes ago, they were all shooting like 2.7K
right, right.
on the Alexa.
Right. So it's like, newer and bigger and better isn't the way to go always. But if if you look at the Planet Earth series, right, they shot all that in 8K. But what's the advantage? Because they can crop in even farther
That's
into their
so
subject.
beautiful. Have you seen that?
Dude, it's insane. It's
Oh
insane.
my
But it's like
gosh.
you're
I
shooting
have,
animals from 1,000 meters away,
oh
and you're
my
shooting a
gosh.
thousand
When,
millimeter, lens, and then you can crop in another like 17 times. Like, that's invaluable for what they do.
dude, I have a 85-inch 4K in my living room. Oh gosh, that was so gorgeous. A
Yeah.
Sony. Um,
You're gonna pick up the new Sharp 8K that they're
come
developing with
on.
Red.
Come on, bro. I don't know what manufacturer it was that I saw when I went to NAB. At the red booth. Well, it's not even a booth. It was like
It
a
was
hidden
Sharp.
room. It may have been Sharp.
Yeah, it's
I
Sharp.
posted. It's so insane because I posted
Yeah,
a video. I took a video of
I
me. I
remember
don't know if you
seeing
saw
that.
that. And I'm going closer and closer to this image of a chameleon, I think it was. And I'm going closer and closer to the image of the TV.
Yeah.
And that thing, I'm like 5 inches away, and it still looks tack sharp. In the
Yeah.
video, you think that it's a real chameleon. Like,
It's
I
probably
could
only
put that
like
up.
100 grand.
Oh my god, I that blew my mind. That blew
Yeah.
my mind. And it ruined my TV for me. So
Oh, I know. I know. It's not even, yeah, it's technology. Just, that's the problem with keeping up with technology, is it changes so fast these days that,
yeah, man.
it's every 6 months something else is, setting the standard. And so it's,
Exactly.
you can't get caught up. Something I kind of remind myself, when new stuff comes out, is I remind myself that everything that's ever been made before that moment was made without that piece of gear.
Right.
So if you go back
Yeah,
and you look at your favorite movies and whatever, it's
that's
like
true.
all of those were made without that piece of gear, without that camera, without that lens,
Yeah,
whatever. So it's like
for
you kind
sure.
of can, bring yourself back down to earth and remember, everything up until this point has been done without that. So I can probably do it without
Yeah,
that.
I gotta. So yeah, again, so usually my purchases are done more for making my job easier, convenience wise. Uh, so I try to move in that direction. I try to get more convenient lights that would cater more to the way that I shoot. And if I have to travel, I can just, throw them in my bag and they take up less room.
Yep.
That's why I'm considering a couple of tube lights. But it's just never ending. It's never
Nope.
ending.
No,
It's funny
it's a
because
rabbit hole.
I could get rid of a couple lights and nothing is gonna change for me.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just nonstop. But yeah, I mean, knowing how to use the actual gear, the actual physical gear is really where it's at. it doesn't matter what you have, but obviously don't show up to a $20,000 gig using a 5D. You know,
Right. Right.
don't do that. If you're getting paid $20,000 for a job, use an appropriate camera.
Yeah.
And if they kick you out, you deserve it because you should
Oh
never
man,
done.
I got to tell you the story. So,
Go ahead.
we were just where I was shooting New York this past week, and then so we do a lot of work with this agency in New York, and so the very first job that they ever gave us was shooting this spot for Men's Warehouse, but it was like it was a CrossFit thing where they had these guys doing a workout in these AwareTech suits, doing a whole CrossFit workout and all that kind of stuff, um, and so they thought, okay, this would be a good fit for you guys to do this first one because it's right up your alley. So we went to Atlanta, we shot at Emily Bridger's gym, and so we're like, all right, well, let's rent a red for this one. So this is the first time like Mayfield and I have ever used a red. So we order it,
Oh my
and
gosh.
so I think we get like 2 batteries. So we get the helium, we get some CP2s, and so it gets down there, and the thing shows up, and we didn't rent a top handle, and the side handle didn't show up. So all we have is
It's
this
just a box.
this dang brick, and
Oh my
it was
gosh.
so uncomfortable. So like the side handle didn't show up. So that was like on day one where we were just testing all the stuff out. And then so I called the company. I was like, yo, you forgot to send the side handle. Like I need it, but the side handle wasn't gonna be there till like halfway through the day, the next day.
Damn.
So we're shooting this content with a red for the first time with no handles anywhere, like holding this awkward box, and because we only had 2 batteries, we had it plugged into the wall. So we're like tethered to the wall. Like it was such a mess. And we're like,
That's so
we're
funny.
talking to the creative director, after we wrapped this past week, and we were all just kind of laughing about it. Like, man, that could have gone really bad, really quick. Like,
Oh my gosh.
and
That's so funny.
the president of the agency showed up and was like, do these guys not have any batteries? Like, it was just like, it
Really?
was such a mess, man. But it was,
I was gonna ask you, did they know what you guys were going through, or you just kind of keep that in mind?
they saw it, but I mean, they were just kind of like, but the funniest thing was like the client ended up being super stoked how all the footage turned out. And
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
it kind of goes back to the whole thing where it's like, just make it work, right? Like,
Yeah.
use the gear that you have, make it work, and do it, just go about that way. But it was just so funny. It's like, it seems to happen so much where you just kind of show up and you're like, well, I don't know, let's sling it, see what happens, and hope this turns out.
So Brandon Fountain here on the chat has just a comment, and he says, depending on the level you're at in your business, it can matter. So yeah, that's definitely true because yeah, like you said, it's mostly the people that have the gear. And they're saying it because they have the gear and they're like, okay, this is gonna help me this much. And honestly, like even today, like I'll pull out my FS5 when I need the convenience of the XLRs and everything, and or the built-in NDs, or when Mayfield forces me to use it. Personally, I don't like shooting on my FS5 internally. It's just I'm not crazy about the colors, and it's like 50 megabit per second. Could it at least give me 100?
Right. But that's a good point that Brandon made was, if you're trying to shoot something for Netflix, I mean, they have very strict parameters, and it has to be in 4K now. Everything has to be shot in 4K under these strict parameters. So,
and it has certain cameras that you can use.
Exactly. So it's like if you're trying to get to that level, like if you're trying to shoot a chef's table or something like that, gear does matter because you have to use that kind of gear to hit those specifications. But then it does where you're at in your
there is a quality standard for like to put your content on Netflix and all that. But all that would come like tomorrow. I'm not going to decide to make something for Netflix. Like if I think the proper way to do it is have a pitch meeting, and if someone's able to fund it, then get the necessary gear, get the necessary personnel, and do that.
Again, that's another valuation you have to make, where it's like, okay, if I'm going to shoot for 3 weeks or whatever it may be, it's like, how much is a 3-week rental for red going to cost me versus what if I just buy the darn thing and
now you can rent it out too.
Right, another 3 more weeks, it's paid for. So those are all conversations that you have to have with with yourself and with obviously your significant other if you're married, because those are big purchases.
I assume that's what you had to do.
The amount of awkward conversations I've had with the wife where it's like, how do I approach the idea that I need to spend $25,000
on a camera, and then
on a camera.
I mean, was that like the whole kit, or was that just the body?
No. So I initially started with the Scarlet. So the Scarlet retailed at like 12.5, and then but the problem with Red is like it comes with just the body, right?
Right,
So
right.
you get the inside handle, mags, batteries,
Sure.
modules, glass, all that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it ended up being around 25, and then I just
Okay.
I just recently upgraded it to the new Gemini.
I saw that.
Yeah,
How
so
is that?
it's pretty nutty, man. It's like, have you ever played with like the Sony A7S2?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, like when the first time you play with it and you're pushing like 12.8 and you're like,
yeah,
oh man, like it's still clean.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
pulling Gemini out and you're shooting at like 64, 10,000, you're like,
Yeah. So
holy crap, like it's still a clean image. Like
yeah,
there's hardly any noise. It's like that was, man,
because reds are not low light cameras in general.
no,
They're not low light cameras. And then this is the
no.
first one. I got to play with it at NAB.
Yeah.
It's very impressive. Very,
Yeah.
very impressive.
And so I made the decision because they were doing the limited time thing where you could trade in the Scarlet and they'll give you, X number of dollars trade in, then you pay the difference.
Sure.
And I was like, for the amount of run and gun work that we do, it's like having that flexibility is really valuable. Having that ability to shoot in not good conditions.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time in a lot of dark gyms or dark basements and whatever else, and having that additional flexibility is definitely a big deal.
It's funny because the first time I saw Mayfield shooting on his Red, it was at Wadapalooza. It was at a 5 a.m. race, dude. It was a 5 a.m. race. It was super early in the morning. It's still dark outside. And I was wondering to myself, man, how is he getting anything like with his Scarlet? How is he getting anything? And he was shooting on the Rokinon, which I think was like at 1.8 or something like that. I know it goes
Rokinons are 1.4,
1.5, something like that. Rokinon Cine, yeah. And that was my initial, because I already knew that Reds are not low light cameras, and I know that Scarlet it's even a little bit worse on the Scarlet, specifically because on the Dragon it wasn't good in low light, and from what I understand, the Scarlet was just a little bit worse. But anyways, I think that this was great. You know what? It's so funny. While I have you, I think my next episode I'm gonna talk more in depth on this with a panel on my next episode. But let me forward the question to you. So yesterday I was talking with one of my friends, Fernando. He's been on the show before, and he was telling me about a 128 terabyte SSD. I mean SD. And he sent me the story. He sent me the thing on Instagram, and I'm like, that's a lie. That's a
128 terabyte.
Yes. And I'm like, that's not true. That's not gonna happen. At least not now. And he was like, yes, it is true. Here's the website. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, we start going back and forth. I'm like, even if it is true, why would they do that? So I think it was Sony or something that announced a 1 terabyte SD, I'm sorry, a 1 terabyte SD, which, okay, it's believable. Yeah. It's believable, right? I'm like, there's no 2, there's no 3, there's no 4, there's no 5. You're just gonna go from 1 to 128? Like, how? So his art, it's so funny, and I'm gonna let him come on the show probably on a very soon episode, and I'm gonna allow him to defend himself because we really got into it. But I'm like, dude, it doesn't make any sense. His argument was, you cannot stop progress. I'm like, it's not even about progress. It's about like business. It's, I'm like, how are you going to go from 1 to 128? Like, what would you charge?
I think those things aren't even designed for functionality. I think it's just designed as a showcase for the company to show, like, here's where technology is going. It's like,
right. I can see that.
Yeah, sure. Because like you could shoot like, if you had that in a Red Mag, a 128 terabyte Red Mag, I mean, you could shoot in 8K, 96 frames a second for hours and hours. It's like, I mean, there wouldn't be really a functionality until you just get to the point where like everybody's shooting in 20K and whatever. I mean, that's, I'm not gonna
Yeah,
say
and Brandon here on the chat, and this is actually Fernando said this. Brandon here on the chat said getting red for 10K footage, and I'm like, but this is an SD card. This is
yeah.
an SD card. It's meant
No,
for like a camera that doesn't even shoot.
no, you can't. Yeah, Red's got its own mag and it's an SSD.
Right.
You know, it has to shoot it, has to be able to record it, 300 megabits per second.
Is there what's the highest terabyte you can get on a Red mag?
I think one terabyte, I believe.
1 terabyte, right?
Yeah, I believe. I may be wrong on that one. I've got a 960. There may be a 2. I'm not sure, but I think 1 is, from what I know, the highest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't imagine what that would cost.
Exactly. How do you?
It would literally cost. I mean, a 1 terabyte costs right around $3,000. So times that by 128.
God. And that was another argument I had, but you know what? Let's end it there because I want Fernando to have a chance to defend himself. So I'll bring him on the show and we'll go at it. We'll go at it. I'm actually going to include a couple more people into the conversation that they could give their 2 cents. But anyways, I think this was a great episode, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
No, thanks for having me, man.
Where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, most of my stuff is just going to be on my Instagram. It's Preston Smith Photography. So that's where I try to put everything I need to do better about posting in other places. But Instagram is kind of, I've got a decent following there. So that's just kind of where it all goes.
Yeah, I've been following you for a while. I'm going to be putting all the links and all that stuff on the show notes over at iFilmmakerpodcast.com. Make sure you go and follow Preston Smith Photography at Preston Smith Photography on Instagram. And just a reminder about our giveaway that we're doing with FNV. It was actually supposed to end on the 30th. They've actually extended it to the 4th. So go check that out. And just a reminder, we were live today on YouTube. If you didn't catch us live, maybe on the next one, maybe you subscribe, maybe you get that notification. So make sure you do that. And also links to everything that we talked about today and all that stuff is going to be over at iFilmmakerpodcast.com over on the show notes for this episode. So, all right, guys, Mr. Smith, thanks for joining us on this episode.
Thanks,
and
man.
We'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.